Forest Hill, a new housing estate in Garden Suburb, is flanked by bushland. A selling point many new residents say convinced them to buy there. But they fear this tranquil setting will go if Lake Macquarie Council allows the bushland area to be rezoned residential.
Most people are devastated.
Residents are also concerned about an increase in traffic flow.
In the brochures, when we bought here and we paid the price accordingly for our land, it was to be a no-through road with passive traffic and a quality lifestyle with the bush.
A council report proposes a control plan to ensure any development proceeds in an environmentally acceptable manner.
Patterson's former courthouse is now a museum filled with nostalgia on Australia's early days of settlement, farming and river trade. The latest acquisition is the McKellar memorabilia on display to Open Heritage Week. Dorothea McKellar's association with the Patterson district was researched by Val Anderson of Newcastle. At the weekend, there was great interest in her photograph and writings. The museum boasts the only tape recording of Miss McKellar reciting My Country. Historical Society President Cameron Archer led more than 100 people on a 3-hour walk around the village to see and hear about Patterson's important link with Australia's development early last century. One reminder of the district's early agricultural pursuits is the staddle, once used to dry corn cropped in a bygone era. These hopeful writers are wasting no time preparing for the competition. The Nestlé Write Around Australia is open to more than 500,000 senior primary school students with an aim of nurturing creative writing.
We're quite sure that with this program we'll be uncovering some future writers, great Australian writers, to go with the ones we already have.
As part of the program, there will be workshops with well-known Australian authors speaking to students to inspire their young minds. Newcastle author Michael Stevens spoke to this group about becoming a writer.
It's a way of talking to them about books and letting them ask you anything at all, no matter what it is.
According to Mr. Stevens, Australian writers are leading the way when it comes to children's books.
Australia's going through a sort of golden age at the moment with children's stories. There are some wonderful writers, and Australia, I suppose, has some of the best children's authors in the world at the moment.
To take part in the competition, students have to write a 500-word story about anything they like. Entries close in early May. Amanda Bolger, NBN News.
It was one of the more disappointing losses for the Falcons, going down to a Sydney team that had to rush in the retired Dean Uthoff and basketball commentator Steve Carfino, who hadn't played at the top level for 2 years. Scoring baskets had been the team's biggest problem, but on Saturday night the Falcons lost the ability to defend as well, with coach Tom Wiseman vowing that they would never play that badly again.
I think we played a better offensive game, and then the defense went out the window. I think those are some of the problems we're facing with the new team, the inconsistency. When we get one focus, we lose focus on something else.
But there has been one player standing tall amid the 5 pre-season losses. Local Scott McGregor living up to the potential that last year earned him a place in the Falcons train-on squad aged just 19 years old. He out-toughed one of basketball's bad boys on the weekend. Even his teammates weren't safe. Ben Pepper, the recipient of an accidental headbutt.
Actually, he played a good game individually the other night, but it wasn't his best game of the preseason. He's had 27 points and 19 rebounds in a game already, and for a kid of his age, it's quite remarkable.
The Falcons are trying to organise more pre-season games with Sydney and Canberra to try and find that winning formula before the start of the season proper in just a few weeks' time. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. Luke Bartlett made the most of the 1 metre surf, winning his heat to help Nelson Bay High beat St Francis Xavier in the semis. The Bay went on to win the final against Belmont, with Bartlett progressing to the 4-man Scholastic final to be held on Sunday before the Surfest shootout. He'll be joined by Merewether High's Mark Adam, Lambton's Dylan Austin and Jai Burns from St Pius at Adamstown. Meanwhile, former Newcastle surfer Nick Wood has regained some of his old form to come third in the Margaret River Quicksilver Masters in Western Australia. American goofy footer Chris Gallagher downed Tahiti's Vatia David in the final, ending Australia's 11-year domination of the event. Yet another motivation for Australians to do well in Surfest, with the open competition to start tomorrow. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. A roll-up of a different kind at Newcastle University today, with students puffing away in protest over marijuana laws. It was organised by the University Hemp Club, which was established to help end marijuana prohibition.
There has been studies showing that marijuana is in fact not very bad for you in terms compared to alcohol, heroin and other drugs.
But that message was rejected by 2 students who had another gospel to preach. The state government may not think dope smokers go to hell, but it says small-time users don't go to jail either. That's its reason for not changing marijuana laws. It says the current system works. But the Hunter Centre for Health Advancement says there would be some benefits of decriminalisation. It says it would reduce the social stigma of smoking the drug, which would increase the potential to educate people about the effect on their health. Dope smoking can cause the same cancers as normal smoking. Some studies have also suggested it heightens existing predispositions to psychiatric conditions. But no marijuana-related deaths have been recorded. In comparison, 6,000 people die each year from alcohol, 20,000 people die from smoking tobacco. But the club doesn't only want smoking laws changed, it says hemp is also a clean, green alternative to existing fuels and fibres.
You can make paper from it, stronger and more durable paper. You can make paint from it. You can make oil and fuel for cars.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News. This is the Koala Habitat Atlas. According to its authors, the most comprehensive study into koala numbers ever conducted in Port Stephens. The red areas represent core koala habitats, 4% of the entire area.
We've put an estimate of approximately 500 animals on the population. All evidence is that the population is decreasing very rapidly, and we're mindful of the fact that the longer term impacts associated with more recent activities in the area are still to be realised.
The Australian Koala Foundation says the figures cry out for an immediate moratorium on development in koala-sensitive areas. That would include an end to mineral extraction at the Tomago sand beds, just months after RZM won the right to recommence mining.
We've asked for an urgent moratorium on any activities that are going to impact those habitat categories, and if that includes sand mining, so be it.
NBN was unable to contact RZM today. Port Stephens Council refused to commit itself either way. It says it could take up to a year to decide what action to take in koala zones.
The koala population, as far as I can see, ranges from anything from a few hundred to a few thousand. Our problem is, who do you believe, and then how do you act on it, and how do you look after both the koalas and the people?
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
A stiff southerly breeze made a mess of the 1 metre waves at Newcastle Beach today, and plenty of fancied competitors saw their chances blown out of the water. Among the early casualties were two of the sport's young lions, in the form of Wollongong's Michael Lowe and Californian Tim Curran. All eyes were on local hero Nick Wood in his round 5 heat, but for the second time in a row he scored an interference penalty, and on this occasion there was no miraculous comeback.
I felt like I had the form on the board, but I didn't have any luck with the waves. So in the end, I tried to go for a wave, what probably cost me the heat.
Foster's Bo Emerton also bit the dust today, and he didn't even hit the water. The highest ranked Australian on the World Qualifying Series injured ankle ligaments at Margaret River last week and was forced to withdraw from his round 5 heat. The carnage continued later in the day when American Chris Gallagher, fresh from a win at Margaret River, finished last in his heat. Veteran Stuart Bedford-Brown was another victim of the fickle surf, along with fellow West Australian Taj Burrow. Byron's Danny Wills survived a tense heat, and Newcastle's Paul Parks has emerged as a genuine dark horse, progressing to round 6 in impressive style. Bruce McKenzie, NBN News.
The last time the Breakers and Knights met in Newcastle, there were fireworks. Last night promised plenty of the same. But Glenn Sprod put on a show of his own before crossing to Jason Bennett to give the Breakers a 1-goal lead. But it was to be a very short celebration for the home side, Marth scoring from a set play to equalise. The Breakers had chances to go ahead, but it was the Knights who converted, going into the break 2-1 up. 2 unanswered goals in the second half, giving the Knights a 4-1 win. In basketball, the Falcons' run of losses continued against the Kings in Sydney last night. Lachlan Armfield, one of the few standouts in the 12-point defeat. In rugby, Singleton, Lake Macquarie, Waratah and Merewether all recorded wins. Mixed results for the Knights juniors, with a win, a draw and a loss. And in the first day of the Newcastle cricket final at No. 1 Sports Ground, Waratah Mayfield has posted a competitive total of 298. Andrew Sargent top scored with 62, with the best Walls End bowler David Salep, 3 for 64. Walls End only batted for 2 overs before stumps and is none for none with a day to play. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
The 224 surfers and the 10,000 spectators have gone home and the clean-up has begun. But their legacy has left behind $1 million spent on hotel rooms, food, entertainment and spin-offs like T-shirts.
Easily the most successful event that we've had so far.
It was a dream weekend for the promoters, near perfect surf, clear skies and some radical surfing. The 42-strong contingent of Brazilian surfers made their mark, with Guilherme Hurdy winning the event and fellow countryman Nico Pateratz third. It was definitely an international event. Each day the surfers on the internet were making at least 1,000 hits or calls to the Newcastle Beach base from around the world. Planning is well underway for the next Surfest, with more surfers and a higher rating.
We've probably been working on it now for around 2 to 3 months in preparation for it. And what we tried to do with the sponsors that were gathered at the event over this weekend, we put a proposal to them for 97.
It's a business where every second counts. That's why the Fire Brigade is about to install a new computer dispatch system which will cut response times, with Newcastle, which covers most of northern New South Wales, to be the first control centre to come online.
Effectively what it means to the community is we'll be improving our service to the community by getting fire trucks to fire calls quicker.
These officers will be the first to use the system. They're undergoing a 3-week course to prepare for its implementation later this month. On average, the Fire Brigade reaches a blaze within 7 minutes of a 000 call. It's hoped that can be cut by up to a minute with the improved technology. It could be the difference between a fire being contained or burning out of control, the difference between life and death. And the computer link with 3 other control centres will ensure there's never a communications blackout.
Any one site suffers a catastrophic failure, such as the earthquakes that happened here a number of years ago, then the other 3 sites can take over that work and support the centre that's been lost until such time as we can restore services to that area.
Once the system is established in Newcastle, the technology will be expanded to cover the entire state. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Cyclone Tracy became Farmer Tracy today, the ride-on mower, a far cry from his weekend heroics. On Saturday, he slashed across the Wacker turf quicker than the Fremantle doctor, breaking a 16-all deadlock and getting the Knights out of jail. Pencilled in as a possible replacement for Jamie Ainscough, the former centre come second rower looked at home in the number 3, scoring the match winner.
No, I don't want to go back to the centres. No way.
But he did admit to enjoying the moment against several of his former teammates who hadn't lost their sharp tongues.
They were layering up and calling us names and we were giving it back to them, and just get around Jeff Doyle and inside David Boyd. That's real good feeling.
Had the last laugh.
Yeah, we had the last laugh, and it was just a shame we didn't stay overnight and have a few drinks with them.
Next Monday, the Knights take on the Saints, now coached by former Newcastle mentor David Waite, who was instrumental in advancing Tracy's career, moving him from the backs into the forwards.
Yeah, Waite made me go to the second row, and that's proved out to be a good turning point for me. And a lot of the guys there, he's left the same side, it's virtually there now, and we'll have a point to prove to him.
In the Tragedy Mard Championships, Caves Beach crew took out their first national gold medal in a decade, but their celebrations were cut short. They won the event in which Kurrawa oarsman Robert Gattenby was killed after his boat collided with McMaster's. Other seniors to excel included Terrigal's Veronica Lee, Wombrel's Christy Liu, Swansea Belmont's Matt McGregor and the club's rescue and resuscitation team. Meantime, another story of adversity ended in gold in the Newcastle and Hunter Valley Bodybuilding Championships. Shauna and Cameron Hubbard both won their divisions and overall titles only days after losing their mother Lee to lung cancer.
She was buried on Friday and we changed our music and dedicated our routines for her, and it was a bit of a tearful moment but also a joyous one because we both cleaned up, so she would have been smiling.
Shauna will now retire from the sport while brother Cameron will move on to the state titles. And in soccer, Adamstown has maintained its position near the top of the Super League with a 2-1 away victory last night, while the Saints downed the coast.
For 50 years, alligator weed is now such a worry for Port Stephens Council. The council fears it could spread to our drinking supplies.
We're very, very concerned that it doesn't get into Grahamstown Dam, because if it does, then the control of the plant will become very, very difficult.
In New South Wales and Queensland, the alligator weed damage and control bill tops millions of dollars. There are new concerns of more outbreaks, with the weed being grown illegally to be sold for use in Asian cooking. Growing or spreading alligator weed is an offence under the Noxious Weeds Act, and anyone caught could face a fine of up to $5,000. The weed is being marketed under different names. Some people believe they are buying Muckanawanna, which has a similar appearance. Port Stephens Council is calling for public support to stamp out any alligator infestations.
We would like people to, if they have any concerns about its presence, to come and see us or see anybody in the Department of Agriculture, and we'll happily give them advice on what they should do with it.
There were few tears as this old yellow Mini was laid to rest today. The funeral procession pushed the car through to a central courtyard at the university before the official service began. The students from the University Green Club say it's time all cars were put to rest, describing them as a luxury that our planet can no longer afford.
Cars are one of the most major contributors to greenhouse emissions from carbon monoxide from the exhaust fumes.
Today's performance was part of the university's Environment Week, with a series of other posters and information on display around the campus. Emma Ossian, NBN News.
Emotions are running hot in Curry at a residents' meeting last night. The people again showed their anger over plans for a dross or aluminium recycling plant near the town. Options are limited to fight on. There may be no grounds to take it back to court. The only chance is finding a fault in a point of law. The meeting called for the union movement to step in and place a green ban on the site. But while the union movement is supportive of the people of Curry, it says its hands are tied and it cannot step into the fight.
Governments of both persuasions over a period of time through the introduction of legislation have made it extremely difficult, if not impossible, for the trade union movement to implement green bans.
The Land and Environment Court has listed tough restrictions on the approval of the plant, but residents don't trust the company Alumino Australia to stick to the rules.
I have seen nothing in all of my operations to indicate that these people will not.
There was consensus too that the environmental watchdog, the EPA, would be no help in keeping the company to the tough restrictions. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
It was 2 weeks ago that the state government introduced video surveillance in an attempt to cut costs at Maitland Jail. The initiative was accepted by prison officers who saw it as a way of saving the ageing prison. But it appears the government knew all along the jail would be closing. Maitland houses 127 maximum security prisoners with 109 staff. But the jail, which was built in 1862, is, according to the government, too old and inefficient. It will close in stages, the first 50 beds later this year and the remainder by July next year. The Prison Officers Union has criticised the move to close Maitland, saying it's concerned about the traumatic effects relocating will have on staff and their families. It also believes the closure will be devastating for the Maitland area. That's echoed by local member Peter Blackmore.
The suppliers to the jail at Maitland is certainly a lot of money to the community of Maitland each year, and they will feel terribly let down by this government.
50 maximum security prisoners from Maitland will be transferred to Cessnock. The minimum security corrective centre there will be upgraded at a cost of $1.2 million. And a change also in Tamworth, with the medium security facility to become a remand and periodic detention centre. The move has been welcomed by local member Tony Windsor, who says such a facility is needed in the northwest. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
Dr Howe's dissatisfaction with the public hospital elective surgery situation at the Mater has been brought to a head by, he says, the cancellation of the last 5 operating lists involving 28 patients.
I can't, in honesty, book a patient who needs a cancer surgery into a system which isn't going to operate. So I've said to them, if they don't sort that out, then I will, regrettably, but resign from the system.
For its part, the Mater administration rejects the claims, saying they are not borne out by the facts. Catholic healthcare spokesman Chris Rigby said today figures show an average of 1 patient per day being cancelled, and that only being delayed for 24 hours. Dr Howe stands by his assertions and blames lack of sufficient effective communication between various sections of the hospital.
We book patients and then unbook them, and then book them and unbook them. You know, it's a nonsense situation, and what it does to patients and their relatives is just enormous and a real emotional, logistical problem.
The Mater said today that Dr Howe has been offered more operating time at the hospital if his patient list grows. You'd have to admit that the old branch library, tucked away in the charming Lambton Council building at the corner of Lambton Park, isn't exactly run off its feet. But then again, you'd also have to acknowledge its importance to the less mobile elderly population of the area.
Well, like it's my age, this is far enough to go to for a library. The nearest one would be at New Lambton.
And you know all the locals, you see them here, and so many people use it.
The latest threat to the branch comes in a Council Business Committee report, which says $40,000 a year could be saved by closing it down. And Councillor John Tate says if opposition isn't mounted, that could happen next financial year.
$40,000 is not a lot of money to provide the very essential service that this does for the local community. And I just find it in great contrast that a council is prepared to sell public assets for less than its value, and that's what's just happened with the civic site, and now they're talking about trying to save $40,000 by closing a library. It's just not on.
Councillor Tate's first move was to organise a petition, with signatures being collected at the nearby shops.
There'll be quite an outcry from this community if this is persisted with.
Just before 3 o'clock, a 22-year-old man lost control of his laser sedan on a slight bend in Sandgate Road. The vehicle slewed first onto the footpath, knocking down a small tree, before careering back onto the carriageway and into the rear bogie of the semi-trailer which was travelling in the opposite direction. A wheel of the semi was torn away by the impact and it came to rest harmlessly in the car park of the soccer stadium. The front of the car was crushed, trapping the young driver for 3/4 of an hour before rescue teams could stabilise his condition and cut the metal from around him. They had to contend with white glue, which has splattered throughout the vehicle and all over the injured driver. Once released, the motorist was taken to the John Hunter Hospital for treatment for multiple fractures. Late this afternoon, he was in a serious condition in intensive care.
The Anglican Bishop Roger Hurft, along with the Catholic Bishop Michael Malone, today expressed plenty of goodwill as they discussed the true meanings of Easter. Bishop Malone says it's a good time to reflect on the way Christ gave his life to save our sins.
It's almost as if he invited death. He walked into it. He allowed himself to be pushed around to show us that someone, somewhere, somehow had to break the chain of violence. And he was prepared to show us how it was done. So I think the lesson we learn is that we get nowhere by angry confrontation and holding grudges against people and venting our prejudice in hateful ways, but rather through compassion and love and understanding and forgiveness. These are the ways that Christ taught us to go. And those ways lead to new life.
Bishop Hurft says, following on from the Clean Up Australia campaign, we should think about cleaning up our lives.
Greetings, friends. Clean Up Australia has had a tremendous impact on our society. It talks about changing our ways in which we deal with waste. Easter and Good Friday speak about another Clean Up Act. The Clean Up Act within, with our resentment, our grief, our bitterness, our hostilities. God acts with a cross that appears on a garbage heap and changes us in order to forgive. May that be our Clean Up Act through God this Easter. God bless you.
Pigeons are the stars of this 17-minute documentary which traces the life of one bird from the nest to its first day at the pigeon races. Titled Wings in the Wind, the picture is the result of months of work by hunter filmmaker Graham Bryant, who says he has long had an interest in filmmaking.
Well, my father and I actually had a picture theatre just before I left school down at Norwood's Wharf. Just a little show, 16mm, and it's sort of grown from there.
It was only recently he developed an interest in pigeon racing after discovering it was one of his son-in-law's favourite hobbies. Deciding it would make a good subject for a documentary, he began work on his latest project.
Oh, I'll be honest, I know nothing about pigeons at all. Well, I didn't at that stage. But no, my son-in-law was is a pigeon breeder and flyer, and when I first met him, he started telling me all about pigeons, and I thought this might be a bad little subject to make a video on.
The documentary has proved a great success, scooping the pool at the Australian Movie Makers Convention now being held in Newcastle, winning Best Picture, Best Video and Best Documentary. Emma Siossian, NBN News.